XconMedia.
Welcome to XconMedia. Appreciate you tapping in. We got a special guest. This is former sheriff of Clayton County, Victor Hill. How you doing, my brother?
I'm doing good. How about you, sir?
Good. I'm awesome, man. I'm awesome, blessed, and highly favored, man. And happy to see you, man. Happy to see you made it through, because a lot of people don't understand or realize prison is a traumatizing thing, and it can change you. And as a person that voted for you, I think maybe in the last 2 elections or so, I think I got my voting rights back in I think I got my voting rights back in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was whenever I had a chance to vote, I was back at it. So how you doing, man? How you?
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, man. And it's an honor for you to say that a man that got his rights back voted for me. That means a lot, because that's a unique position. It's not like you running for Congress like I'm running now. You running to be the top cop, right. And then for a person who has been in the system to vote for you to be the top cop, that means a lot to me. So I appreciate that.
Oh, no, not a problem. Listen, man, I went in and I changed my life. And when I say I did not want to look, I came out of there, I didn't want to look back. Hey, I'm doing what law-abiding citizens do. I wanted my county straightened up, and I know Victor Hill don't play. People all across this nation know. Don't come to Clayton County with that mess. Don't do it.
I appreciate that. I'm glad you brought that up. I want to address that for a second. Okay. A lot of people, I think there's 2 misconceptions that I think about that I want to talk about. Number one, I think there's this misconception that there's some conflict between me and so-called convicts. I don't really believe in that. Inmates or whatever. And of course, there's a lot of folks that probably didn't like the way I run my jail, but actually most inmates did. And a lot of relationships developed out of it. There's a lot of guys that were in my jail that have become like my godsons, and folks have reached out to me and say, hey, I appreciated the way it was ran. You changed my life. Now, of course, everybody's not going to be excited about that, but that was one thing. I think another thing too is when this political prosecution took place, a lot of people thought that when I went to prison, that those inmates were going to be mad at me, shank me, or whatever like that, because, hey, you're here. But actually, those guys embraced me. They became my professors. It was their idea, and they helped me write this book, Vigilante Sheriff, The Truth About Corrupt Prosecutors Weaponizing the System. And it was actually their idea that I run for Congress. When I made my announcement, one of them has gotten out, and he came on the announcement to say, yeah, it was our idea and we endorse you to run for Congress. So there's been this thing out here that, hey, this guy was torturing prisoners and stuff. That's a lie that was put out. Of course, we'll talk about false prosecution and lawfare and stuff like that. But that's one thing. And another thing I want to talk about too is when you were saying that a lot of people knew about running people out of the county. Is one thing I want to address real quick with that. A lot of people say I ruled with fear and intimidation, and there's truth to that. I don't back down from that. I don't like to use the word rule. I would prefer govern or lead or whatever. But here's what a lot of people don't understand. The man that taught me how to be the sheriff told me something I'll never forget. He said that he was in a jurisdiction where there was a 90-year-old woman that would push a grocery cart through the neighborhood every day full of money, and no one ever robbed her. And you know why, right? Because they knew who money that was. And they knew that if they stole money from her, consequences was going to be swift and severe. And he said, that's the way we got to police to get people safe. He said, people out here who are raping, robbing, and murder got to know consequences would be swift and severe. And this ain't the place to do it. Let me move someplace where the police is soft. Right. There's a difference with, it's a difference between, not a difference, but hard is good. As long as you fear, hard is good. And the majority of people respect hard, regardless of their background. So I'm glad you brought those 2 things up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, like, here's the thing, man. If let's just say the treatment was the way it was in prison, stay stay out. It's real easy. It's real easy to do. And this is coming from somebody that I've been arrested numerous of times. And then by the time that last time, that judge, because I was in and out, hit me over the head, and it was a wrap.
Right.
For a very long time. I guarantee
Right.
I came out of there with my mind right that time. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of people, man, you know, got to take accountability for you put yourself in the situations. You know, most of them. I'm gonna say not, because there are a lot of innocent people that's in prison, and like yourself, went to prison. So I'm speaking for the ones that constantly put themselves in that position. So
Yes.
take us back, if you will, because I know you got a huge announcement. I was watching you live last night, and we got a huge announcement, but we're gonna come up with it in a little bit. But take us back to, because I didn't know you was something else before you was the sheriff.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of people, it was many moons ago. And of course, most people don't remember. Most people always remember me as the sheriff. But before I got elected sheriff, I was elected to the House of Representatives. So I do have legislative experience. This is a role that I've held before on a state level. So I was elected in 2002 to the Georgia General Assembly. And while I was there, it was a successful term because I did something a lot of people who get elected to the Georgia General Assembly don't do. I actually authored and passed bills into law, 4 of them. Let me say something, and I'm glad you brought that up. So let me say this. When I got elected in 2002, the state turned red for the first time in 100 years. So we had a Republican governor, Republican Senate, and, you know, Democrats had held power all those years. And to get anything done, you had to be able to work across party lines. And that's what I did. I didn't get into all the rhetoric and calling folks racist and whatever. I mean, who knows? They may be, they may not, but that wasn't going to get anything done. So what I had to do is work across party lines. The one thing the governor wanted me to work on at first, couldn't do it. And I said, listen, I can't work with you on that, but that don't mean we can't work on other things for the betterment of the people. And he was agreeable to that. And by working both sides of the aisles, I was able to pass 4 bills into law, and bills that actually meant something. Like one of them protects children from being molested. It used to be a time where if a person molested a child, and we gotta look at the difference of that. It's not shoplifting or whatever. I think if a person gets shoplifting, they get first offended, that's fine. It's a mistake. Maybe they had bad times. Person was smoking weed, he gets first offender, that's right. But you don't accidentally molest a child.
Right.
They were getting first offender, and then they would apply at a job at a kindergarten, a daycare, or whatever, and then reoffend. And of course, you can't see the record because the way first offender is designed is to give you a chance to get a job, so nobody sees you got a record, which I agree with. But molesting children, that supersedes that. You know what I'm saying? So that was able to get passed. And the other bill, I think I'm the second proudest of. I don't need to go into all 4 of them, but it used to be that if you couldn't speak English or you were hearing impaired and you needed an interpreter because you were the victim of domestic violence, you had to pay for an interpreter. But now, if you were the person that actually did the crime, you got your interpreter paid for. So I was able to change that law, make the law where they get their interpreters paid for too. Because why does the victim have to pay and the perpetrator don't? So it's good common sense legislation that help everyday people, the everyday man. You know, there are issues that aren't really, when you talk about helping people, it transcends Republican and Democrat.
That's right. Because I mean, for myself, when it comes to the elderly and kids, they gotta be off limit. See, you gotta draw the line somewhere. I understand. I don't want anybody to commit any crimes, but when it comes to these elderly people and these kids, they gotta be off limits. You know,
Absolutely.
and that's why a lot of stuff happens to people like that inside of the prison system, you know, because they got to be off limits. They're not a part of the streets, you know, and you got to draw the line somewhere. So I salute you for that's big. Them was some big things. I didn't know that you had when you was in office for that. I was in prison. I was I was probably at Central State Prison in Macon at that time. So
Wow.
I salute you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you. Yeah.
So after that, how did you like end up
The
as
sheriff?
the sheriff? Were you in law enforcement, or you left your seat and went straight into being the sheriff?
No, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I believe
Yeah.
it or not, I was a cop when I ran for the state house, and I
Okay.
still was a working officer. So it was interesting. I was enforcing the law and making a law at the same time, and that's
Mhm.
interesting because some states you can't do that. In
That
my
would be
home state,
viewed as conflict of interest. Yeah.
absolutely. In the
Right.
state where I'm from, in South Carolina, you can't be a part of the legislative and executive branch at the same time. But
Mm.
Georgia, you could. So I was
Okay.
actually filling two roles at the same time. At that time, I was a homicide detective.
Mm.
And the Georgia General Assembly meets for 40 days a year, and I would take leave of absence to serve there and then come back to the job. So I've been in law enforcement a long time, and I was an active homicide detective at that time. And so my goal was always to be the sheriff. I enjoyed my time at the
Mm.
legislature, but my passion, of course, was fighting crime.
Right.
And
Mm.
you'll read a lot about that in the book. But
Mm.
the whole Batman thing happened because I had a childhood friend that was murdered, and that's really was where I had a passion for homicide.
Mhm.
And my thing was violent crime. My thing was rape, robbery, and murder,
Mhm.
and that was my expertise and where I was at. So,
Mhm.
there's different type of cops. You know what I'm saying? There's traffic cops, there's probation cops,
Mhm.
there's cops that only look at white collar crime. Well, my specialty was violent crime.
The worst of the worst.
Right.
Yeah, where it really matters. Like all crime matter, but it really matters right there. So yeah, I salute that. Yeah, I think I was reading somewhere that you've been in law enforcement since you was 18.
That's
Is that
correct.
okay?
That's
In
correct.
Charleston, South Carolina, it started there.
Right.
Okay.
And that's where I learned from the legendary Reuben Greenberg, that story I told you. He was actually the first African American police chief in the history of Charleston City, and actually the only one in the history.
Mm-hmm.
But he was more than the first African American. He was the greatest chief that city ever had. No
Mm.
one ever took control of the violence in the streets the way he did. He was the best. And and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm proud to be the first African American sheriff. But
Okay.
it comes a time where we got to go beyond that. Okay, you're the first, but are you the best? Are you good at it?
Mm.
We got to get past being the first black, but being the best in the business, black or white. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I understand that because I know when I first got to Georgia in '93, the apartment complex I was living in was called Timberlane. It was off
I
of
know
Riverdale
exactly.
Road. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think
I used to hang out.
you know, I believe
Yeah.
I think the name then changed 2 or 3 times.
Right. And
So
it was a good place back then.
yeah, it was pretty good back then, but I think the project started closing down
Yep.
around Atlanta, like Bowen Homes, Perry Homes, like they shipped everybody to Clayton County because they wanted to get everybody out of the city. They didn't have public transportation back then. They didn't have MARTA back then. And I think when I found out, yeah, they shipped everybody out of there. So at this time, I'm in prison, but I still had an ear to the streets. I still knew what was going on. So I think
Right.
a black sister had started transit out there, and I think they saw how much money she was making. They ran her out of business, and then that's when MARTA started coming out there a couple years later. Is that true?
There could be truth to that. There
Right.
could be truth to that. I
She was
can't say
young too.
exactly, but there
Yeah,
would be people making transportation money out there because there wasn't a transportation
it wasn't
service.
right.
So right. So when they came in, that hurt her business. Now I don't know if that's the reason why. It's
Right.
this big fight about transportation, and of course, it's interesting you bring up that apartment complex. So that apartment complex is now essentially a project.
Yeah, it is.
And
It is.
right. And
Yeah.
it used to be a place where airline stewardess and pilots stayed who didn't
Mhm.
live in Atlanta because it's so
Mhm.
close to the airport. But
Right.
it became one of the most dangerous complexes in Clayton
It
County
did.
now.
Yeah, it did.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
did. Yeah, because that's where my that's where I started at when I came to Georgia. My mother stayed back then. I stayed with her for a little while. But yeah, so I'm pretty, versed in the Clayton County culture and everything. So I know what it was and then what it turned into. And then when you became sheriff, it's like you see the name on the cars, you see everything, you see the roadblocks. Because I at a couple of points of time, I was driving for MARTA in like 19, 20, 21. They used to have roadblocks set up. And I jokingly come through because I'm in the bus. I
Right,
joke
right.
you all, but look, man, I'm not giving you no license, man, and that's it. We going on a high speed chase, crack everybody up, So yeah, I'm driving that big articulated bus talking about I'm about to take y'all on a high speed chase. But when it came to Clayton County, it was we know Victor Hill don't play. Tell us, tell us.
Well, let me tell you, I think I know what you want me to tell you. So let me tell you a lot of what that has to do with. There were some unique things. Okay, everyone knew there was this flag at the front of the county in the main entrance. There was these signs, saying, warning criminals about Clayton County. And let me explain to you the philosophy behind that and why I did that and why it got to be that way. Well, I'll tell you the story about my mentor and what he taught me. But I want you to think about this. There was a time when people said that Al Capone ran Chicago. There was a time when they said John Gotti ran New York. I guess Pablo Escobar was running Colombia or whatever like that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a gangster or anything like that. But the point that I want to make is either the gangsters are going to run the jurisdiction or the sheriff is going to run it. So in my county, I want it clear there wasn't going to be, with all due respect, no Big Meaches, no John Gottis, no El Chapos. It was going to be Victor Hill. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I meant that in a way that I wanted to keep the county safe. So that means if there was going to be somebody running a drug operation, running goons or whatever, they were going to have to take that to another county, not my county.
Right.
The flag and the signs was a marking of the territory. Gangs mark their territory with graffiti. And when you go through areas and you see graffiti, they're in control because they're marking the territory. Well, the strategy was take the graffiti down and put up the sheriff's flag and put up the sheriff at the sign and stuff like that. And that way people know who's in charge of this jurisdiction. Okay, if you're in charge of where you're at, that's fine. If your government is weak enough or your sheriff or chief is weak enough to let you run the streets, that's unfortunate, but that's what it is. But that wasn't going to be the case in Clayton County. And I think what we learned from it is there's this misconception out there that Black people don't like law and order, that Black people are cool with 10 or 20 people hanging in front of a store, asking for money, pulling on girls and cussing people out and stuff. And that's not true. If that was true, I wouldn't have got reelected 4 times overwhelmingly. Black people want to live in peace and everything like that too. I wrote in my book, the time that I spent in prison, and I don't think they understood. I said, hey, inmates are tough on crime too. They don't want any druggies in the unit stealing stuff, stealing people's tablets and stuff like that. And they dealt with it. And I wrote in that book and described how they dealt with it, whatever. So they, where I was at, they policed their own. And I write about it in there. One day I came back, my tablet was gone. So I went and spoke to the sheriff of that unit, which is a guy that became a friend of mine who was actually a high-ranking member of the Vice Lords. He said, "Here, we'll look into it." They looked into it, all right, and I got my tablet back. And that guy ended up checking himself into isolation.
I know that's right. I know that's right.
So, and I was amazed. Right, these guys wanted law and order too. They didn't, So a lot of people don't quite understand that. So they always think that there was some type of rift between me or what, and a lot of if you want to call it gangsters, we also had a mutual respect. I met guys that were drug lords in Atlanta, and they respectfully stayed in DeKalb in Fulton County, but they felt that I kept their families safe in Clayton, and showed me a lot of love and respect as a result.
All business, no nonsense. I mean, that's the only persona I've ever known about you, is all business. This is how we doing it. And that's the bottom line, you know. And I think you one of the only counties that I see the actual sheriff riding the streets, because it's like you got Clayton County PD, but you got Clayton County sheriffs patrolling as well, you know.
Right. Well, you know, there's 159 counties in Georgia, but only 11 have a county police. County police is really, to be honest with you, county police really start when county commissioners get mad with the sheriff and they want their own police force, and they end up costing taxpayers millions of extra dollars. But if you go to Douglas County, there's no county police. There's just the sheriff's office. They do it all. So there's usually some history, like in Henry County, I think a commissioner got locked up for DUI and he got mad at the sheriff, so they created a county police. And that's how it gets started. Well, by law, the sheriff is three things. I call it, for lack of a better term, a trinity of duties. He's a chief jailer, which means he runs a jail. He's a chief officer of the court, which means he's responsible for the security and safety of the court, which doesn't sound exciting, but it's very important because you can get a Brian Nichols that can shoot and kill everybody, like what we saw in Fulton County.
Right.
But last but not least, he's a chief law enforcer. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3 just because there's a police force. With my predecessors and sheriffs, they kind of like, okay, well, there's a police, so I just won't do anything. I'll just chill out. And a lot of people felt the sheriff didn't have that. Well, my philosophy was the sheriff had the jurisdiction and the authority to do it, actually more than the county police. I mean, they actually come to the sheriff to get sworn in so they can have jurisdiction to leave the county or go into different places. So you got citizens paying for a sheriff's office, but then you got armed deputies, law enforcement officers that are essentially being told that, hey, don't ride past this, ride past that. You don't do that because you're the sheriff, and that doesn't make sense. Well, at that time, and you described it, how there was an influx and everything into the county and how the crime turned urban. And I write a lot about that in the book. The police wasn't doing what was needed to be done. So I promised the people when I ran, you elect me sheriff, and I'm going to stop the drive-by shootings. I'm going to stop all of this. And then that's what I did. And I had the authority to do it. Now, of course, that stepped on toes. People didn't like it. But at the end of the day, the people who didn't like it were appointed and elected officials. When you're the sheriff, my boss is not the mayor. My boss is that little old lady that goes in and hits that ballot box and say, I want you to be the sheriff. So if she called me and told me there was a trap house across the street from her, I didn't call the mayor. I didn't ask some politician, hey, is it okay? That was my boss. So I made sure that trap house got gone that day.
I know that's right. Yeah. So you ran the streets, you ran the jail. Like, talk about how tight and how pristine you ran inside that county jail. Cause I don't know, I ain't never been in there, so I only hear about it. But I
hear about it.
Yeah, I never been. I'm not going either.
Well, you know, let me tell you this. Essentially what I did was turn it into a military boot camp. You know, I had a chance to see a few different places around the world. And I've noticed that countries where everyone, when they're 18 and they're required to do 2 years in the military, there's a different level of discipline. There's a different level of respect that you find in those particular areas. And a lot of our young men will never get in the military because, unfortunately, a criminal record will prevent them from going in the military, which is sad, because there was a time where a judge could actually sentence you, give you an alternative sentence where you go serve 4 years in the military as opposed to serving 4 years in prison. And I wish we could get back to that, because there's a lot of folks, if they went and did that 4 years in the military, okay, you will serve 4 years in the military, that could do so much for them. And a lot of these young men who are so fascinated with guns and stuff like that. Well, at least you could use it to protect the country. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to just killing each other in the streets. But what we did was we turned to a military boot camp. So everyone had to go to attention, make their beds. It was sir, yes, sir, whatever. Sir, yes, sir, ma'am, yes, ma'am. And the results was excellent. Now, if you're a person that, hey, I'm used to going to jail and just getting contraband and drugs, and of course you're not going to be happy if you're used to. But let me tell you what it did. It kept the jail clean. We didn't have bed bugs. Our COVID was less than 1% when COVID hit. Nobody was getting stabbed. No one was murdered. Nobody was escaping. And a lot of people decided they didn't want to come back, which was good. That was the objective for them not to come back, you know? So I never apologize for how I run that jail. Of course, you always going to hear things in the street. You're going to hear things on social media. You know, one thing a lot of people talk about is everyone had to face the wall. And they were like, you'll hear things every night. He thought he was God. You couldn't look at him. The truth of that was they had to face the wall, not just for me, for females, for commanding officers. You and I have both, I've ran a prison. You and I have both been to prison. Right. We all know what happens. You got guys that will expose themselves to females. The nurses, the guards will masturbate in front of them. And then, of course, you got some violent people who, if they get a chance to suck a punch or do something like that, they will. But it's just a safety mechanism. They face the wall, their hands behind their back so we can see what's in their hands. So if there is a shank, we're going to see it. And if they refuse to face that wall or go to the wall, we know we got a non-compliant because there's a reason he's not doing that. That stuff, it may not have been enjoyable, but it kept people safe. We didn't have all the bed bugs they got in that jail now. We didn't have the stabbings, the killings. 5 men have been killed. We didn't have the escapes. And, you know, I had people reach out to me sometimes to get out. I had a gentleman reach out to me and said they were smoking so much dope in the jail, he had to go get an EKG. He said, just from inhaling all of it. And it was interesting. He said, look, man, I didn't really care for you, but I would much rather been in the jail the way you was running than the way it's being ran now. And I respect that. Right. You know, that's not a, you know, when you're the sheriff, that's not an easy job. There's no way to make everybody happy. I mean, I don't think I've ever fired anybody or put somebody in jail and they loved me the next day. Right. I mean, that's just one of those things. Now, there's some people who evolve and they come back and say, well, hey, you know, I'm at a certain point in life now and I get it. But at that moment, it takes a while for something like that to happen. And that's understandable, you know?
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, people, that's one of the reasons why the door is revolving. Because you go in there, you know, some of them getting more dope than they get on the street.
Now that's a fact.
You gonna take a chance going back because you know this is where you coming to, you know. So it had to be your goal and objective, and what the goal should be overall is to make you not want to come back.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. So it was all intentions was good. It was a strict father type thing. And that's what it was. But of course, you know, we live in a very interesting times now, you know, where strictness is considered being cruel or being mean. I think we saw, you know, right before I went in, there was a situation with a coach. And you would probably, I'm not going to sit there and lie to you and tell you I know football, but I know you do. And it was a coach, and he was coaching his college team, and he was cussing all the guys out and yelling at them. And it was interesting to read the comments. We were talking about, oh, you couldn't talk to me that way. You can't talk to my child that way. Then you also saw comments saying, hey, this guy wins games, and he turns these boys into men. Well, that was a concept of what I was doing. And of course, we see it got turned around in a political prosecution. So what we had going on that was good. It was turned around to make it look as if though I was torturing people and mistreating them, and that's not the case at all.
Wow. Yeah, and it's crazy that you say that about the coach, because I like my son texted me this earlier today, and he said Kirby is walking around there cussing everybody out. It's funny you said that, and I say, look, he the man. It's worth He put a lot of people in the NFL. He done made a lot of millionaires. He's the man, you know.
Right.
So didn't get offended at him, but he did make that comment about that. Wow. So that's
in same scenario.
You got to run it like that.
Exactly. There's guys like for instance, okay, you know, they made up these charges that I violated people's constitutional rights. And let me talk about that a little bit and tell you about this.
Let's talk about that. Like, yeah, let's talk about what happened.
Well, here's what a lot of people don't know. The only thing people know is they said that 7 men were put in a restraint chair. If you listen to the media, they'll say 7 men was put in a restraint chair. Some were left for hours. Lie. Nobody stayed in the chair more than their allotted time, which is 4 hours. And then miraculously, but you know, there are people in the chair for much longer than that. Interesting, you read cases where the Supreme Court said this is completely legal, and a guy was restrained 20 hours or 16 hours, or one guy was in a chair just recently, and I was talking about it, I think it was 12 hours and died, and nobody went to prison. They just said, well, we suspended some people and we had to fire somebody or whatever like that. And I'm sure if that was the case and someone died with me, they would have been trying to charge me with murder. But here's the fact that people don't know if they don't get the chance to read the book. And there's a documentary coming out about this. But here's what people don't know. That case started over a political campaign. There was a deputy that I fired for stealing guns. And there was a guy working on his campaign. This guy had been in and out of his jail before, and he had been in the chair before. That chair was used 630 times by my staff. The only time when they came to look for the uses of the chair, they went and looked for it. Out of that 630 reports, which ones did the sheriff say use the chair? Then they went and visited these guys. Some of these guys have been out of jail a year. They never said, hey, I'm injured. They never said I urinated on myself or something. And then all of a sudden, all 7 of them that they contacted all agreed, yeah, I urinated on myself. Yeah, I'm injured. Yeah, I felt pain. But these folks, they had been out of that chair a year, and some of those people have been out of there a year, out of the jail. Never said a word. We never had a lawsuit about that chair. We never had any complaints. We never had any injuries. When you were in the chair, a nurse has to check you before you get in the chair, and she checks to make absolutely sure the cuffs aren't tight. Every 15 minutes, an officer has to come and check on you. And then when you get out of the chair, a nurse comes back and check on you again. And that happened in all of these cases. Well, all of a sudden, they all urinated on themselves. Well, if they urinated on themselves, where's the decontamination report? Because a man can't urinate in a chair and then you just put another man in the chair. He has to get a new uniform. It never happened. You look at the pictures, there's no one pants wet. There's no urine on the floor under the chair. One of them, there was water to the side, clear water. You could clearly tell it's a leak. And you know, I was talking in a deposition. Can you tell me how a man can urinate on himself and then the urine somehow makes it to the right side of the chair? It's going to soak in the pants, and if anything, build up, and then the drops would be directly under. It just never happened.
It was a hole under the seat, isn't it? Isn't it a hole or something under?
No, not directly under the seat. Okay. There's a hole in the back of the seat, so that when a person sits there handcuffed, they're there that way. You see it on YouTube. You see it and stuff like that all the time. Right. Okay. So basically, imagine somebody comes to you and tells you, "Hey, is this you? You're in a chair. Your rights are violated. Really? I can get my charges dropped. I can sue." And that's exactly what happened. And every witness that came up was either people I arrested or people I fired. They lied to the grand jury. And then let me tell you what gets even more interesting. This case was taken to the feds by the Clayton County DA. She was working with the people who wanted to be sheriff, and the goal was to get me out so that they could get in. The federal court judge, friends with the Clayton County DA. Her husband used to work with the Clayton County DA. She's Facebook friends with one of my political opponents. So the whole trial was rigged from the beginning.
Conflict on top of conflict everywhere.
Exactly. Exactly. But if you listen to the media, hey, he violated people's civil rights. They were left in a chair for hours. Some urinated on themselves. And here's the question we really got to ask. Let's just say one of those guys urinated on themselves, which they did in their line. Okay. When they were checked on, did they tell someone they need to use the restroom? And if they did, who was it that told them they couldn't use it? Because if someone did tell them you can't use the restroom,
that's in trouble.
We all know, right? We would have known what I would have done. And then obviously they should be indicted too, but they weren't. Out of the 7 charges, are you ready for this? I was only not convicted on 1. Do you know why I wasn't convicted on that?
What's that?
Because there was a video that clearly showed I didn't order him to the chair. The sergeant ordered him to the chair. You clearly see the sergeant order saying put him in the chair. Did anyone ever go and indict the sergeant? No, it was about me. It was targeted, and it was targeted. And what was it targeted to do? We need to make him a convicted felon, because if he's a convicted felon, he can't run again. Let's just say hypothetically that I did violate that particular law, which I didn't. It would come under a misdemeanor because no one was injured. There was no physical violence. No one hit, tased, whatever like that. They were restrained because of the violence that they had, the pre-attack indicators, stuff like that we're trained to do. And it kept everyone safe because when we're using that, anyone that showed that they were violent, they were restrained for safety. Let's just say I was guilty of that. It would have been a misdemeanor. But they purposely did it that way because they needed a felony in order to get me out of office.
Out of there. Wow.
So that brings up why I'm running for Congress. So think about this. You know, because having a felony conviction eliminates a person from so much stuff, you have people trying to make people convicted felons using the system. Let's get them to be a convicted felon. That way they can't do this or they can't do that.
And shut them down from doing a lot of stuff.
Right. And not just celebrities, not just politicians. We see it happen to politicians all the time. We saw it happen to Burl Ellis in DeKalb. Whether people like it or not, that's why they indicted the president. They were trying to stop him from winning. Yeah. And whether you like him,
pay attention.
Exactly.
I was just blindly voting, and it was Democrat every single time. I didn't ask no questions. That's what made me start paying attention to what they were trying to do, because they do use
weaponization of criminal justice system,
right, to try to stop people and get them out of position. So I agree with, and that was the only way they was gonna get you out of position, because I promise you, you could have probably won 10 terms, 15 terms straight. People in Clay County love you. Yeah.
And that's what it was about. It was lawfare. It was criminal, weaponizing the criminal justice system to go after political people. And but it's not just politicians now. Okay, we see it happen with celebrities. We saw it happen with the Chrisleys. The Chrisleys and I had the same judge. And so the stuff they were saying about this judge, I know had to be true. And you see it happen, even if you look at cases like Young Thug or whatever. Okay, I'm not saying that he's an angel and he's 100% innocent, but there was a lot of extra stuff in there that was just ridiculous. It was the way the RICO statute was used, and they misused, because remember they tried to use that RICO statute on me a few years ago. They actually said I stole the same patrol car 5 times. They said every time I drove my patrol car out of town, it was theft of a motor vehicle. And every time I put gas in it, it was theft, and they put it under RICO. We all know RICO is designed for the mob. Right. And it's designed for at least hundreds of thousands, but usually millions of dollars, because it's organized crime, it's racketeering. But they play games with these charges. And see, what people got to understand is this. This is bigger than Victor Hill. This is bigger than the president. This is happening to everyday people every day, where they stack charges and then they overcharge people. And this can happen to anyone. And even if, let's say, I don't know your case, and maybe one day we'll get to talk about it, but let me tell you what a lot of guys in prison told me and why I'm fighting for them. Do you know most of the guys told me, and it's in this book, they never said, I'm not saying I'm innocent. What they're saying is how they were treated. I was overcharged. I was over-sentenced. And then a lot of them, these charges would have never came to fruition if it wasn't for what we call a grand jury. And a grand jury meets every day in this country. You don't get to be there. Attorney don't get to be there. You don't get to hear what they say to this grand jury. You don't get to defend yourself.
Evidence, and anything they say is going 9 times out of 10 be a true bill.
Exactly. The grand jury does whatever the district attorney tells you, did you know America is the only country left with a grand jury? Liberia still has it, but they rarely use it. The United Kingdom abolished grand juries in the 1930s. If it wasn't for grand juries, you would never see the type of stuff you see going on in my case, Young Thug's case, the president's case. And I'm gonna tell you this, there are a lot of people, the backlog of the criminal justice system comes from this grand jury. I personally would like to see the grand jury abolished. On a federal level, that would take a constitutional amendment. It's not impossible, but it's harder. But at the very least, it should be reformed. If we're going to indict you, you need to be notified. You need to be there. Your attorney needs to be there. You need to hear what's being said. You need to be able to refute what's being said. Exactly. And well, that's what I'm getting to next. The prosecutors have a license to lie to a grand jury. If you lie to a grand jury, you get charged with perjury.
Right.
They lie to grand juries all the time. They lied in my case both times. And we know for a fact they lied because they actually said there was a guy that was punched, and when they took the hood off his head, I was standing there. Well, that never made it to trial because it never happened. But no doubt they said that to incite the grand jury to get the indictment. Well, let's look at the everyday man. You're indicted now. Okay. Well, you know, the feds talk about we got this 90% conviction rate, and people think, wow, they're geniuses or whatever. Then really not. The next thing, first you lie to a grand jury, get the guy indicted. And a lot of people, they just want a way out. I don't have all this money to go to trial. Then they put this plea gun to your head and tell you, well, I'll let you have probation. I'll let you have 2-3 years. But if you take the trial, you might get 20 years. Well, they take the plea, and they plead to something they're not guilty of. So basically what you're doing, exactly, we call it a plea gun. And so you got a lot of people, you'd be surprised. We're not saying everybody is innocent, but there's a lot of people that carry the status of convicted felons and they're not guilty of anything.
It's a few things because I've been studying this same thing. It's the overcharging, the charge stacking. Like basically one event happened and they go in that book and they try to put every single charge. So now you went from facing 10 years to 40 because you got 30 charges on you. You know
exactly.
And they didn't lie to the grand jury to get the true bill of indictment. So now you go on to trial and you basically halfway guilty before you get there. You know, it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but it's really you halfway guilty. You better prove that you're innocent.
And if you're high profile, the media is going to convict you in a court of public opinion before you can't get a fair trial because they're another group of people with a license to lie. So by the time the jury get there, they've watched all of these stories that's pretty much convicted you, and you got to overcome all of that. You know, they talk about the freedom of the press, but is it the freedom of the press or is it the freedom to lie?
Right. And that's one of the two things. Another thing is these prosecutors can do whatever they want with no penalty. That's what that's the problem.
And that's what I want to fight for in Congress. Yeah. They need to be held accountable. We need to reform these grand juries. They need to be open, transparent. They need to be transcribed. And if a prosecutor presents something to a grand jury that's a lie, he needs to exactly.
They know it's a lie. It's proven that it's a lie.
Right. You know, they give guys like you and I the status of convicted felons, but they're committing felonies every day, lying to grand juries. Now, I'm not saying it's every prosecutor, but there's a lot of them that do it. And there's a lot of people that got indicted because, okay, we can just lie to this grand jury and get him indicted. 9 times out of 10, he's going to take a plea. And then let's say he takes it to trial. Okay, you got the media putting one side out to taint the jury. And then look, if you get a judge like mine, you get a judge that, okay, they can call the shots where you can't present this. They can actually, in a motion to eliminate, tell you things you can't talk about that could probably get you acquitted.
You're right.
Right, free. There was things that if we had presented to that jury, there's no doubt I would have won. 2 old ladies that were beaten in a store weren't allowed to testify. One of the guys that I put in the chair, they got the video, and I'm telling the guy, I said, I don't apologize for what I said. What are you doing here? You know, I want to know why, if you don't live here, why are you in the grocery store and why are you beating a 60-year-old woman in a wheelchair?
Right.
And so I meant that. And I told him, yeah, because like you said, we got to protect our elderly.
Yeah.
Well, those women wanted to testify about the injuries, about how he beat an 80-year-old woman and knocked her to the ground out of a wheelchair. They weren't even allowed to testify. Why? And then I had the judge coerce a jury. You know, the jury was actually out 4 days in my case, and it was a holdout jury. And we saw something we've never seen before. He was called out twice. So think about it. It's a high-profile case. So he gets called out, so the media's there. Now the media knows who the holdout jury is. They know. The man said, hey, they're yelling at me. They're screaming at me or whatever. When she does, we're going back in there. Exactly. Yeah. And so let's get to this Democrat-Republican thing you're talking about. So, you know, a lot of people was wondering, would I run as a Democrat or Republican? And here's why. The reason why they asked that question, it shouldn't have been a question, but it was a big question. And here's why. Because I ran as a Democrat my entire career. But the reason they were asking that, and I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So last night, so we're going to get to that now.
Sure, no problem.
You announced what? Tell the world what you are doing before you talk about that.
Absolutely. I announced that I'm running for the 5th district for Congress, the United States House of Representatives.
Okay.
Right.
And that covers
covers
Summer, Fulton, DeKalb, and Clayton County.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's the 5th district.
Okay, awesome.
And the question was, would I run as a Republican or Democrat? Which most people wouldn't usually ask. But let me tell you why they asked.
Okay.
The DA that took this case to the feds and plotted with the guy running against me is a Democrat. He was a sitting Democrat as a chairman. The judge that did everything we're talking about was a Democrat appointee. All right. So a lot of people thought, okay, well, why would he want to stick with the Democratic Party when it was these people in this party that did that? And I gave the analogy, and I'll give it here. You know, I got a nephew, 2 cousins, wayward. My brother had to deal with our nephew one time. That's a whole nother story in itself. I had 2 cousins I had to run out of Clayton County. One I had to take to the Greyhound bus station and make sure he didn't walk in Magic City while I was there and ship him back home. And the other one, I had to run him back to DeKalb County. Okay. They're still my family, though. I had to crack down hard on them, but they still my family.
Right.
So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But like I said last night, we got some horrible people in the Democratic Party. You know, it's horrible prosecutors. 2 of the worst prosecutors are right here in Fulton and Clayton. Ooh, and exactly. And we got to be honest. The Democratic Party right now is weak and it's dysfunctional. And I said it, and I don't apologize for it. We need some strong masculine energy in the Democratic Party. So instead of leaving it, what I want to do is see if I can bring some common sense back to it. And like I said yesterday, I think we got an amazing opportunity. And you and I both experienced something while we can relate to each other. We both know what it's like to serve time in prison. Well, let me tell you this. We got an opportunity here. That's an amazing opportunity we've never seen again. We got a Black woman who has been appointed to pardon Kazar. She was serving 25 plus life, which is ridiculous. Her first time drug offense, no violence, and she's going to serve the rest of her life in jail. I don't know who that judge is, but I hope they're still on the bench and they're finding a way to do something about that judge, because that's ridiculous. Okay. Yeah. Now the deputy director of the BOP is a man that served time in prison, and he's been given that opportunity. And then we have a president who was convicted because he was running for office, and they were trying to find a way to put this convicted status on him so that they could win. I don't care whether it's Democrat or Republican. If you don't like a person, you don't vote for them.
Right.
You don't indict people and send them to prison and make them have a convicted status just because of that. Or you don't indict people like they did to Chrisley because you believe, okay, well, if I indict someone famous, maybe I can become famous. Right. You know, I call it in the book the Robert Ford syndrome. So we got a unique opportunity that if we're ever going to reform this criminal justice system, if we're ever going to do something, for lack of a better term, radical, that could really make a difference, like reform how we do these grand juries, commute these sentences of people serving ridiculous sentences when they're no threat to society. You know, prison is really designed for dangerous people.
Them records.
Exactly.
Records.
Right. Prison is really for dangerous people so they can't harm society. Your rapists, your murderers, your robbers, people that if they're loose, people going to get shot, people going to get killed, they're going to do whatever. But a lot of these crimes, we'll be honest, most of the people in jail are there for financial crimes. Drugs is a financial crime. I'm not justifying it now. The problem why I had to stop drugs is because of the violence that comes with it. But most of those guys, they weren't violent. They were trying to make money. So if you're there for a nonviolent drug offense, and I put you in jail, I met guys serving 30 and 20-some year sentences for selling drugs. Okay, does it work? Because there was more drugs in the prison I was at than was in my county. So you gonna lock them up for all drugs. I'm telling you. So you
some drugs. You know, if people, a lot of people
everything
might be they in there smoking a little weed. No, they got the crank, the meth, the pills, the ecstasy, everything in
everything.
And what I'm hearing now, some of these prisons got firearms in them. So it's
that's true.
It's everything in there. It's in there.
Everything is there. We saw it. And that's why the way I fought drugs was different. You know, I wasn't trying to find the kingpin and give him 30 years, because the only thing you're going to do is replace the other kingpin. Hell, people will help you get the kingpin, so they'll be the kingpin. The drugs are still there. So what have you done? Okay, I removed him, so somebody else take over. What I did with drug dealers is stop their ability to sell drugs. If I block the drive-through window at McDonald's, you can't sell Big Macs, so you're going to go out of business. So all I did was put a police car in front of the trap house, or a road check where everyone was coming to get to the trap house, where you can't sell drugs. Okay, of course he ain't happy because he ain't making money and he got to leave. But guess what? He's not getting a 30-year sentence. All of the grandmothers and church mothers are happy because the drugs are gone. The kids can play because they ain't got to worry about nobody shooting or whatever like that. Problem solved. You stop the ability to do it. Well, I want to take that same philosophy to Congress. You know, running around trying to get all these prosecutors unelected is a lot of time and a lot of money, and they can do a lot of damage in a 4-year term. What needs to happen is take their ability away, just like I used to take the drug dealers' ability away to sell drugs. Same thing I did at the jail. I just blocked off every way to get into jail, and everyone had to get searched in one way, so they couldn't get drugs in.
Right.
Okay, you take these grand juries away from these prosecutors, and you'll see the prison population drop in half.
Oh, yeah.
I assure you. And you won't see folks getting all these ridiculous charges and overcharge. You know, listen, we had a situation where a female was running around a track being coached, and unfortunately she lost her life. And I don't want to be insensitive to that. And I'm not saying that those coaches don't have any responsibility, but our DA indicted them on murder. You know what murder is. Murder means you plan to kill someone. That's malice aforethought. Okay, are they guilty of involuntary manslaughter? If you want to take it that far, okay, yeah. But why are you indicting people on charges that don't fit the element of the crime? And that's another thing that we've got to put on these prosecutors, because they'll charge you with a million crimes that what you did don't fit the element, just to get you to plead to something else that don't fit the element.
And the thing about it is they'll call it that lesser included crime.
Right.
It'll be lesser included to the major charge. So that's how that's their way of trying to slide that in.
We have 19 million convicted felons in this country. And if we look at most of these convictions, okay, if you convicted a murder and you did a drive-by shooting, I get it. Okay, there's better things you could have done. But when you look at some of these charges and how people became convicted felons, and the games that these prosecutors play with grand juries and charges and stuff, it's ridiculous. And then exactly.
The thing about it is you're committing a felony to try to get him convicted on the felony. So who's right? Who's right in that situation?
brother, you just we can open the doors of the church with that one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Trust me, I know. I didn't been around, I know. And you around here, you got the tag of convicted felon. Now you stop them from doing certain things. And guess what? You stopping them for what? Like, we need people in certain sectors. And just because, and I'm gonna give this example about me. Since just about the entire time I've been out, off and on, I've been driving tractor trailers. Now, at first, I was getting turned down. Oh, you got a record, you got this, you got that. When I got onto a company, I gave them my best. When I tell you, by the time they found out about my past, I had then got all kind of recruiting awards, training people, different drivers awards, safe and on time, no accidents. I'm the best in there, because just a couple years ago I was in prison.
Right.
So a lot of times these convicted felons, you want to say, oh, we can't hire you, when the convicted felon is the person that you should hire. Because when somebody changed their life, they giving everything. I don't care if I don't like the job. I drove for MARTA for 2 years. I did not like that job, but I got certificates for perfect attendance.
Yes.
And I'm showing up to work every single day, giving my best. I'm protecting all of the people on the bus. Because of where I've been, I'm giving my best. And see,
exactly.
When you disarm convicted felons like that, when you disarm them like that and tell them you can't do this, you can't do that, it's hurting society. So now you keeping them in this endless revolving door because they're trying to do better for themselves, but they can't.
Let me give you an example. I talked to a young man 2 days ago. He got in contact with me via social media, and this young man wants to be a cop. And he said 20 years ago, he pleaded to theft by receiving. And he said really what happened was he bought something that he honestly didn't know was stolen. And he said his attorneys told him to take this plea, and he thought it was the best thing he could do, and based on finances and everything like that. But he had no idea what he was getting ready to do with his life and all the things that he was blocking himself from. So he took the plea. So now 20 years later, he wants to be a cop. But you can't be a cop as a convicted felon. Okay, so let me tell you something. This not just blocked him, but let me tell you, it hurts law enforcement. Let me tell you why. Do you know how many law enforcement agencies are understaffed because they can't find no one to do the job? Okay, so you got someone that wants to do the job and it'll be great, but he's a quote unquote convicted felon because he bought something that he didn't know was stolen. So are you saying that this guy can't be a good cop? Now, we know if someone's been in jail for armed robbery or murder or something, okay, that might be taking it a bit far. But you're saying that a person that got caught up in something like that can't be given a chance. And that's how this bureaucracy is doing. So you're hurting both sides. You're hurting him because it's something he wants to do and be great at. But most law enforcement agencies I know of today are understaffed, and they hunting and hoping somebody will come and work for them. And the truth of the matter is, if so many people wasn't being disqualified and eliminated from the process, a whole lot of businesses, including law enforcement, would be fully staffed right now. But because of this bureaucracy and what happens is we got these prosecutors playing ridiculous games with people's lives. Well, if I can get him convicted, he can't do this, he can't do that. Let's convict him so he can't be sheriff. Let's convict him so he can't be president. Let's convict him so he won't be able to reopen a bar. Do you know in Tennessee, you can work in a bar as a convicted felon, but you can't own a bar? What sense does that make?
Why?
Right. And you can't drive a tow truck in Tennessee if you're a convicted felon. What dummy came up with that rule? But let me ask you this. You know for a fact, because you was there, some of the best attorneys, there were guys, the jailhouse lawyers. Let me tell you something. If they were on my legal team, I probably wouldn't have got convicted. The guys I met that was at the library, they got to be
self out, but they will get you out. They sitting in that law library and they getting people out the door left and right, getting them back, motion for new trial, appeal, habeas
Yes.
corpus. They getting them out left and right. Yeah.
Why can't they go to law school when they get out and become lawyers? Why not?
Felon.
Right. We got to take a second look at that, because basically you got some I don't even want to pronounce that word because I'm gonna mess it up. But basically, you've got some folks with very questionable characters that become prosecutors, and they play those games. And like you say, they commit felonies every day to convict you for a felony, and the felony they convict is perjury. I can tell you right now, the 2 prosecutors in my case committed perjury, because when they told that grand jury, those folks urinated on themselves. When they told the grand jury that some guy was hit in the face and he think it was me, but then they don't bring it up at trial, but they use it to get me convicted. They could lie to a grand jury. And I want to fight so that prosecutors are held accountable. They need to be locked up and convicted felons for doing stuff like that. But we also need to make sure that there are things in place so that kind of stuff can't happen. And that's why I'm running for Congress. And let me just add this, because I know you got a point. Here's what people got to realize. Well, he's running for convicted felons. This is bigger than that, man. Like I said, it's way bigger than that. If you are a convicted felon, if you dating a convicted felon, if you're married to a convicted felon, if you're related to a convicted felon, he's your father, he's your son, he's your brother. If you're friends with a convicted felon, right? You're talking about everyday people who are affected. Maybe he can provide better for you if he's your father or your husband. Or maybe you don't have to do as much for him because he's doing so well or whatever like that. It affects the economy, like we just discussed. It affects the safety, because you're putting people in predicaments where they reoffend, where maybe they wouldn't if they knew they had options of success. This affects everybody, everybody. So, and that's why I remember a lady said, well, I know the convicted felons would vote for you if they could, but this is what people don't understand. They tried to eliminate convicted felons from the political process. You got your rights back. Some haven't. Okay. Let me tell you what a convicted felon told me. I was in prison. He said, we can't vote, but we can get our friends and family to vote. And he said, and we can influence votes. And he said, and we can raise money or whatever. And I've already said it. If every convicted felon gives $1 to this campaign, that's more than enough for us to take this campaign beyond the 5th district. And if you're not a convicted felon, give $2. Make it a grassroots, because we're going to have people that will do more than that, and we appreciate it. But this affects everybody.
Everybody. It does.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And whoever thought the ex-sheriff, who my life was about hunting murderers and robbers and stuff, now I'm on this fight here. Now, does that mean I'm soft on crime? Of course not. I'm never going to be. And you're not going to be soft on crime, because we want our families, our nieces, our daughters to be safe. We don't want nobody lurking around in the yard and climbing through the windows and doing stuff like that. Absolutely not.
Right.
But this is something that needs to be changed, and we have an opportunity to do it, because there are people in power now that they've been a victim of the system. So if this is a time where we can do like the problem solving caucus does. This is where Democrats and Republicans need to sit down, and we need to agree, yes, this is a broken system. The DOJ was corrupt. There were prosecutors that needed to be removed. Some of them resigned. The one that was responsible for me, the Chrisleys, resigned immediately. And there are things that we're not going to agree on, but I think that's something that we can agree on. If we can't accomplish anything else in these next 4 years, we can accomplish this. Yeah, and I'm going to be laser focused on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And anytime, like a lot of people didn't think that Trump was going to get all the way back to the White House. This man got 34 felonies. He got more felonies than all of us put together. And he's sitting in the White House. So guess what? It's possible.
Possible. Let me tell you, it was an inspiration to me, and it should be an inspiration to every convicted felon that this is American. All things are possible. And what it said to me was that everyday man is tired of this system. We're tired of the media. We can't believe anything they say. We're tired of this criminal justice system that's stacking charges and indicting people and lying about the charges and stuff like that. Judges rigging trial. This was a time where folks said, you know what, you know, and that's amazing. And that means we have a chance now to change this for the better. Do you know that there are countries where when you're running for office, a prison is considered a precinct? You got to go and do a debate there, and the prisoners sit and listen so they decide who they're going to vote for. So imagine, like I was at Forest City. So, okay, well, I need to win Forest City, so I got to go do this or whatever like that. They don't take their rights to vote. They can vote in prison. So, you know, why is it that, okay, you made a mistake? I guess the best way for me to say this, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, is this. Okay. You know, again, I said this before, and I'm going to say it one more time. We invite folks to church and we say, hey, come, the Lord's going to cleanse you all your sins and forgive you. You're forgiven. But we don't forgive nobody. We give them a life sentence of being a convicted felon. Yeah. A life sentence.
It is so unconstitutional because it
exactly
for the rest of your life.
That's exactly right.
It's not supposed to be like that. It's not. People change.
Right.
The only difference between non-convicted felons and a convicted felon is this guy was caught or this guy was wrongly convicted or whatever. That's the only difference.
Or the prosecutor decided, I want to target you, but I'm not going to target him. I don't like you, so I'm going to target you. Look what happened in Fulton County. This same prosecutor that resigned, he said they were violating civil rights. They were tasing people. They were doing whatever. And he had them sign a consent decree. He said that there were deputies there tasing and pepper spraying people just because I told you to get off the phone or whatever. They signed a consent decree. I don't tase anyone. I don't beat anyone. The judge says this is a rare case. I don't know if I've ever seen a case like this. Most cases they're tased, they're beaten. You didn't assault anyone. It's a novel case. But guess what? We're going to convict you and you're going to prison. These other folks get to sign a consent decree, which shows, which means, you know, we're going to send you to prison. Oh, y'all just do right. Y'all been beating and tasing people, but sign this that you're going to start actually not violating people's civil rights. If there was such a problem, my attorney said this, one of my attorneys anyway, the decent one, said that if you really had a problem with the chair, you want to perform how you use it, okay, why can't it be a consent decree? But they went straight to criminal prosecution. There was a reason. And that reason was to eliminate me from the political process because they weren't going to beat me at the polls. At the end of the day, that's what it was about. They wasn't
going to beat you. They was not.
Right. And that's what the judge, and we know the judge was involved in it because she was mad when she said it, and it's on the record at my sentencing. I see you still got your hands in the sheriff's raise, and I don't know if you learned your lesson. Well, hell, she's friends with one of my political opponents. So that's why me being involved in the race meant he wasn't going to win. And she had a Freudian slip and said that at sentencing. So that's why. Go ahead.
No, what they sent you away for, I done been to Hall County Jail, Cobb County Jail, DeKalb. I done been to Wright Street. I went to Clayton County Jail way back when it was in Lovejoy for driving on suspended license in 1993. I've been to Orleans Parish Prison. I have seen that chair everywhere. Okay.
Yes.
I've seen people getting restrained in that chair. You are the first person in history that I've seen getting prosecuted for that. I don't understand
that. I am the first person in the history across the country. Yeah.
I do understand it. They was trying to get you out of that position. So I understand it. That's all it was.
Exactly. Wow. Exactly. So this is not going to be
right. Were you on appeal?
Yeah, we did appeal it and everything. So, you know, but this is there's going to be a very different type of campaign, and this is an issue that needs to be addressed. Let me say this, man. The district I'm running in was once held by an icon, John Lewis, who's actually a frat brother of mine.
I met him one time, yeah.
Right. And everybody admired and loved John Lewis. And let me say this, what I'm running on, if that's not good trouble, what is it? If what I'm running on is not the audacity or hope, what is?
Right.
So, you know, no one can replace John Lewis. I'm not going to become no civil rights icon. I mean, the man was on the John Pettis Bridge. He marched with Martin Luther King. I'm not even trying to be him. You can't be him. Right. But I think this is an issue that we fight and we win I think we get a wink from him from upstairs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, I salute everything that you're doing. And again, hey, you know, I went from historically voting Democrat to now I vote Republican, but it's about with me, with you. It's about if I could vote for you for this seat, I will vote for you. You got my full endorsement because I know what you about. And it ain't even really about party with you, you know.
Exactly.
Right.
And we've got to work across party
We
lines,
gotta work
all
across,
this.
we
Yeah,
gotta
we can't. Yeah,
yeah,
hey, I don't like this person or
right.
this person. Well, we got to work across party lines to get something done for the
Mhm.
people.
For the people.
And
Yeah.
exactly. And there are people in place that I believe they've experienced. Even the director of the FBI has been the victim of lawfare. He understands it. So we've got folks now that they've been a victim. It's just like, I got both sides now. I went to the police academy, and then of course we know prison is an academy. I guess it's a criminal academy, right?
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. And you and I can relate because you and I have had the same experiences. Well, I think it's important that people in power have those experiences so they can relate to the common man. Remember this before I go. When you look at the House of Representatives and the Senate, it used to be called the House of Commons and the House of Lords. The House of Lords was the Senate, and they represented the aristocrat. The House of Commons represented the common man. That's the House of Representatives now. And that's why I like the House of Representatives, because I like the history of it. So who better? You want someone to represent you who knows what you're going through, have experience what you're going through, and so he can be passionate about fighting for that issue, right? Because I can say, well, yeah, man, I understand, and I ain't never been to prison before. Do I truly understand? Well, guess what? I was there, and guess what? I know what it's like to be falsely prosecuted. So I know that lawfare is real. So when I hear people like the Chris Lee say, "You may not believe me, but I'm innocent," nah, I believe you're innocent because I dealt with that judge. I dealt with that investigator. And I know what they're capable of.
Right.
So I think the best people to represent us is people who've been victims of the system, because we're going to be interested in fixing that system because we've been victims of that injustice ourselves.
Or at least have a voice in there. If everybody not in there, some of us need to be in there so everybody know what's going on, because we need to help people from all angles, from the inside to out.
Absolutely.
And you need, people like us need to be in there, because hey, I might be on your footsteps. I don't know. I might be on your footsteps on my way trying to get into Congress myself, man, because
I hope so.
In there. We definitely need voices in there.
I'm glad you said that. Let me tell you this. Part of the reason I was convicted, the reason that the judge and the prosecutors worked so hard to get a felony conviction, is they wanted me out of politics. And that's the only way, short of assassination, that's the only way they could do it.
Right.
I hope every convicted felon across this country start running for Congress until we get that change. Right. And then we can get it changed on the state level and stuff like that, and get things changed so it'll be right. Because as long as we got these nerds for prosecutors that think they can convict people so they can eliminate the competition, we're going to continue to get that. Right. And I hope that my race encourages convicted felons to run. Absolutely. I really do. Absolutely. And then let's change this narrative. Let's change this. Let's have a reformation. Let's have a renaissance, for better, like with the so-called convicted felon. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Absolutely.
Because what's going on, laws of now, what is going on now, you cannot run this country like it's 1950, 1960 and all that. It's 2025. It's time for change on a lot of levels. And this is a part of that change. And I'm glad to be witnessing it. And I'm definitely, hey, when it's time to get on that campaign trail, hey, I'm gonna try to, do what I can do to help and lend my support, man.
I'll be honored to have your back. For you to have my back and vice versa, man.
For sure. Tell the people where, hold on, let me pause it. Okay, so you got a book out. Please tell us about that book. Tell people where they can find your book. Tell people where you at on TikTok, because I ran across you by accident. You just came across my timeline. And
Right.
Tell them where they can find you on YouTube. I'm gonna have all of the links in the description, but I want them to hear from you.
Okay, absolutely. The book is called Vigilante Sheriff, The Truth About Corrupt Prosecutors Weaponizing the Criminal Justice System. This is a copy of it. It's on Amazon. It's an audio book, it's an ebook, and you can order the actual copy. And it's on most everything now. Barnes and Noble. If you're local, it's actually at Nubian Bookstore. And I would definitely, if you want to get the backstory about the prosecution and also a good description about how the criminal justice system is being weaponized, is in there. But even better, I can't really take credit for this book. The inmates, it was their idea. The guys I was locked up with, it was their idea to write this book. What happened while I was in prison is in this book. It was their idea I run for Congress. And when you read the book, it's dedicated to them. And I just, real quick, it says, this book is dedicated to the inmates at the Forest City Federal Correction Institute, where I'm now a prisoner as I write. Excuse me. I thought this prison would become my monastery so I could engage in long hours of meditation. But to my surprise, this prison has become my university and the inmates my professors. I never planned to write a book. This book was their idea and their requirement for my dissertation to earn an honorary doctoral degree from their university. My professor has contributed a lot to the content of what you're about to read and check on my progress. No formal education from an accredited university can match the honorary doctorate in criminal justice I received from them. I will be forever indebted to all of them for helping me achieve higher education. So this book is dedicated to the men I was locked up with. And it was their idea that I run for Congress. Nice. It was them that told me that, hey, you can run as a convicted felon. It was them that say, hey, you were sent here for a reason, and that's because you can see what's going on. And don't forget us and go fight for us.
Nice. I love it. I love it. It's some of the smartest people in the world in prison. They just had a bad break. That is a fact. And you are on TikTok where?
I'm on TikTok. If you go under Victor Hill, Vigilante Sheriff, the name of that book, you'll see it. If you go to Facebook, again, Victor Hill, if you put in Vigilante Sheriff, you'll get it, the name of the book. And the same thing with Instagram. Now on YouTube, a podcast is called The Hill of Justice. And also there's a documentary coming out about my case. It's called American Lawfare. And that will, yeah, okay. American Lawfare.
And I'm gonna put the link in the description. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a link on that on YouTube as well, and how lawfare is being used across the nation to target not just celebrities and politicians, but other people. And it's when you weaponize the criminal justice system to target individuals or stuff. It's going to be a very good documentary. I think it's going to eventually cover different cases, but the first one is going to cover my case and go into details. And you'll see the corruption, the connection with the judges, how the trial was rigged and everything. And so that people can get to see the truth. And I'm glad it's coming out. It was supposed to come out last year and there was a delay, but I'm glad now because it'll be out during this campaign so people could not just to prove my innocence, but so that people can see why I'm running and just how corrupt the DOJ was. And I think it's being corrected now. I really think we see efforts towards that. It's going to take, I'm not going to say it's 100%, but of course, just the fact that a lot of prosecutors resigned tells me a lot because they knew what time it is.
Yes,
but
awesome.
I expect that documentary to be out in the next couple of months. And what a better time because I'm campaigning to fight lawfare.
Awesome. And that's the sad part. Like we only know about this because you have a name. People that have a name. It's so many people in prison for this same stuff. They don't have a name, so we don't know about them. We don't hear their story because they don't have a name. They wasn't, for lack of a better terminology, anybody, you know. So they stuff happen to them and just get swept up under the rug. And
absolutely
get 30 years and we don't know about them.
And that's
So,
and yes, you know what? I don't even need to add to that. I think you summed it up, and maybe that's why, even though I'm, you know, I think the Chrisley said it well. It put them in a predicament where they could fight for others and bring attention to a situation that people wouldn't pay attention to if it wasn't a celebrity or if it wasn't a politician.
right.
And you know, and it's a fight that I think now we can finally get some traction on. So maybe it's the world had to see this happen to the rich and the powerful and to the politicians, because now that they're a victim of the system, they're jumping in on the fight with us. And I think, and that's why I think it's important. We need to work together and join in. We got an amazing opportunity here.
Right.
Because what other time will we ever see this again?
Right. I'm
Right.
in. I listen, I can't. I tell people this all the time. I'm trying to get to the White House. They're gonna hear me because there's a lot of stuff that need to be changed. And hey, I'm with you. I'm walking with you, and we're gonna get this thing done. Because one thing I do know, Victor Hill don't lose.
There we go. And wouldn't it be so nice? Wouldn't it be so nice for me, you, and hopefully 4 or 5 more other? Right. We can have a convicted felon caucus and really help society. Because what people don't understand is that's just a microcosm of society. This affects everything. Even if you've never been convicted, you're a successful businessman, it affects you. People that you could hire that you're not allowed to hire, or you know, it's just on so many levels. It affects everybody.
All certain ways, because a lot of times I used to have to not put, hey, I've been to prison. I'm not putting that on the application. Let me get this job and hopefully I can show them who I am before.
Right.
It's a lot of times convicted felons, they don't have that support system, or they just don't know what to do in situations like that. So hey, whatever, count me in. I'm in. Yeah, I'm in. I'm all the way in. So,
brother, it's gonna be an honor.
It's an honor that you came on my platform. I appreciate you sharing your story. And we will do it again, because I feel like I can go for about 8 hours with you, man. You got a lot of knowledge, man.
I'll come back anytime. And that's not just now while I'm trying or not trying or whatever, going to Congress. Mm-hmm. When I'm in Congress, I'll be back on your show. You got my word.
No doubt about it. I absolutely know. Yeah, and whenever y'all ready for me to come on y'all show, I'm definitely there.
I think we're gonna make that happen real soon, because you got a story to tell yourself.
For sure. And I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of XconMedia. We appreciate you. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you for tuning into XconMedia. Go right ahead and subscribe to the channel. Hurry up!